So the first question for Krishna is the difference between happiness and bliss, and how to transcend one to the other one.
So in colloquial language, if we say happiness and bliss, sometimes they are used as synonyms, meaning that you can use one instead of the other one. However, because we would really like to be in all our lives very precise about what words we use, we felt that it is important to address this, because a lot of people in their lives attain happiness and sometimes they still feel that something is missing. So we decided that maybe this topic would give some enlightenment, some illumination to this. So let's start with an example. If we think about what is the difference between happiness and bliss, it's actually very easy. Happiness is always connected to an object. It means that when you say, I am happy, you will say further because of this and that. Because there are things in this human experience that make the form happy, so we experience happiness in the form, and then we say that we are happy. However, if we say that it's bliss, it's no longer connected to any kind of object, whether it be a mental object, a visualization, or a physical object, being any kind of object from around us. And if you look at it even further, we'll see that, for example, enjoyments of enjoying a food and everything, a lot of times gives happiness, but very few times gives bliss. Because, as we have said, is the object that causes the mind to be happy for it. And if the question arises, then how can we transcend bliss to happiness? What is then even the connection between the two? Now, to answer this question, let's look at first to the self, as we say, the self that is omnipresent and is the self of all, and the intellect, the ego. If you look at the intellect of the human being, we say that it has consciousness. However, if you look at it very closely, it has some mechanisms through which it works. So if it has some mechanisms, some inner dualistic means of working, for example, liking something, not liking something, these are all coming from the mind. And this is why we say that it's not 100% conscious of its consciousness, because if it had been conscious, it would mean that it could be illuminated 100%. But the fact is that when you leave the body, then is when you enter, for example, Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Mahasamadhi, then the intellect is gone and you're 100% gone beyond intellectual approaches to things. And why does it happen that the intellect still appears to be conscious? Is because the self, which is consciousness itself, has a reflection in it. And to understand this, let's think about like a transparent crystal which has no color. And if you put something colorful behind it, that crystal will appear as colorful too, even though it doesn't have a color of its own. The same thing happens with the intellect too. And the same thing happens, in fact, with bliss and happiness too, because bliss as an existential thing has its own reflection in every kind of object all around us. Why is this so? Because we say that the self is existence, consciousness, bliss, as we have spoken about that. And because we say that the self is omnipresent, it means that the bliss is omnipresent too. So it has a reflection in the object. And when we actually experience happiness, we experience the reflection of bliss through that certain object of pleasure, whether it be food or any kind of thing. And now because now we know what is the connection between happiness and bliss, happiness being a simple reflection of bliss, what is the way to transcend it? Now there are certain ways to do so, and let us just express one of them. So one can take any kind of object of enjoyment and just concentrate to that object of enjoyment with all of its attributes and properties: taste, smell, touch, everything. And you just keep concentrating on that object without concentration on any other thing. And you know, the sensation of happiness because of seeing that object appears, because that is why we feel passionate about that object, because it brings happiness to the form. And slowly one can just withdraw the thoughts from that object, meaning that you still look at the object, but you no longer have the thoughts of its properties. So you just look at the object and you stop any kind of thought processes about that object. And when you truly feel that you are established in that state, when there is no more thoughts about it, you even destroy the sights of the object, meaning that you just withdraw the sight too, you close your eyes or you just turn away, and you just have this objectlessness. You just simply withdrew your consciousness 100% from that object. And when you 100% withdraw everything from something, it means that you remain with nothing, because there are no thoughts and there are no forms in your mind. It means that you arrived to nothingness in reality. And from experience, one can see that when you realize that you just enter a free space, because in reality, when there is nothing, we call it an empty space or free space. And in a free space, there is what we call the self, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, because at that free space, the only things that are left is existence and consciousness, because you can still experience yourself as existence, as existent and conscious. And because we know that existence, consciousness, and bliss are three in the one, immediately the bliss arises too, because you have already destroyed the thoughts, and then you just enter the existent consciousness, and then bliss comes too. Another way to transcend happiness to absolute bliss is to focus on the happiness that an object gives, and then just deepen the consciousness, the focus, the concentration on that happiness. Just see the happiness itself rather than the object connected to the happiness. And you slowly take away the object from the whole picture of happiness object. And the moment you destroyed the support of the happiness being the object that held the happiness, you attain to a state when you have the happiness without an object, and then we call it immediately bliss. And the same experience as before holds, that there is no longer any kind of thought or form, because again, you withdrew your consciousness from the object and everything that connected to the object to bliss itself, which no longer has an object. So we can see this mechanism in many other ways, that actually creation is a two-way process that happens from the creator to the creation, can go backwards. So we have seen that bliss itself becomes happiness, and therefore happiness can go back to bliss too. And this is the same that any kind of being, a creation, can go back to its own creator, being one with that. And that is what is the bonum summum, the final goal of human life, as most and all of the masters, in fact, have pointed out, to see yourself as no different from that which you came from, to be one with the one, as we say. So this is actually how you go from bliss to bliss in reality, and knowing these ways to just simply withdraw the thoughts and everything and just enter the blissful states and remain in that blissful state. If one can remain in the blissful state undisturbed by the outside object, then we say that that person has attained liberation. Is total, because it means that that person no longer has any thought processes. It doesn't have any karma seeds that create the thought processes. So if there's nothing left, you overcame your own existence, then that is what we say, that is mukti, because existence itself became your existence. So that is it about this topic.